I'm going to be looking at some of the benefits of immersing in social environments, in these virtual environments, and also particularly within video gameplay and social networking. We are social beings. It's incredibly important for us to be able to connect and to relate to other people. In fact, it's very important for our social well-being, and it's incredibly important for our sense of self, of who we are, and the kind of enjoyment that we have within our life. And what is social psychology? So it's concerned with all of these thoughts and feelings that we have, and how all of these sort of constructs and ideas that we have, and that therefore impacts on how we interact with other people. We certainly, the literature and the research within psychology tells us that we construct our sense of self by interacting with others, so it's very, very important. One of the things about psychology is that we know that a lot of the old sayings come to the forefront and ring true. Some of the stuff that your parents may have said, you become who and what you surround yourself with. We are prone to influence, from internalised sort of cultured norms, by playing video games, for example, by characters and people who we play games with, and also present, whether they're present or whether it's someone on a television screen, or someone within a book, for example. So what's really important and what's critical for this discussion and this talk today is whether someone is influenced by the actions of other people in terms of them actually being present or not. And we know that the research is gaining ground in this area, and that even if someone isn't there, we are certainly influenced by an imagined environment and the presence of someone, even if they're not there. And we're going to explain that when we look at video game characters particularly. So what does it mean for our online environment? Well, why do people do things like self-disclosure in social media? The research tells us that they do this because they want to connect to other people. This idea of relating to others in a meaningful way is incredibly important to us. It counters loneliness for particular groups of people who are isolated, for example, or who may have some kind of a disability, and that we find that actually the research is telling us now that can counter some of these blocks when people don't have good, strong social support networks in a face-to-face, real-life environment. A great piece of research, and I'm going to reference the research as we move through this, so if anybody wants the research, please do get in touch with me. I'm happy to send it to them. There's a great piece of research here done with older people. This is an epidemic globally where we see older people, people are living longer and people feel isolated and they feel lonely. And this research tells us that if people can connect in virtual worlds and computer-mediated communication, it enables them to feel less lonely. It gives them better well-being, not just their emotional health, but also their physical health as well. So this is a great piece of research and very robustly done as well. You'll see that the research I'm quoting is all quite new. As we've said, we're still waiting for the research within cyber psychology to gain ground. And people help each other online. I think they call it face brain and that kind of thing. People will ask each other questions on Facebook. Very, very important. They share similar experiences. Again, in terms of social cohesion and in terms of feeling part of a community. If you share your experiences with other people and they have similar implications, sort of similar experiences to you, it gives you some kind of like assurance that what you're doing is right, and or sometimes what you're doing is wrong. People seem to go to these environments to seek advice from their peers. I want to talk very quickly about an area of research that is definitely gaining ground in cyber psychology, and it's called self-determination theory. It's a theory in psychology that has been around for over 40 years, incredibly well researched, particularly in video games, by a couple of gentlemen called Rigby and Ryan, who have a great book out actually around this. And this theory, that social determination theory, it's to do with a strand of psychology called eudaimonia, which is the idea, the theory of what it is that makes you happy, what it is that gives you a sense of well-being, what it is that motivates you, what it is that gets you out of bed in the morning. And it addresses our intrinsic needs versus our wants. So we might want to just step back and think about what that means. You know, our needs as human beings for good psychological, robust health is very different to what we might want, for example. You know, we certainly need to, for example, relate to other people in a meaningful way. And there's 3 key components to self-determination theory, of which relatedness is one of them. But we'll quickly just break those down, because the research, which is fairly robust, has been replicated time and time again, particularly in the video games industry, breaks down into these 3 areas. And if you get those right, you tend to have a good sense of well-being and happiness, addressing these intrinsic needs, these fundamental needs that we have as human beings. The first one's autonomy, which is the idea that, you know, you are the master of your own destiny, that you carve out how you want to move through the world. The second one is relatedness, really important, and that's why I've highlighted here, because that's what we're going to be talking about. This idea of needing these social networks, of why we might immerse in sort of social media and this kind of thing. And the third one is competence, and that's the idea that we all like to master something, that, you know, you have the opportunity to accomplish things. This research has been done in sort of outside of video games and outside of social networks, in lots of different environments, in work environments, for example. So it's a nice little trick for your HR department if you have one. Just focusing on relatedness as one of the components here. And again, it's to do with this idea, we have this really strong psychological need to relate to other people in a meaningful way. So how might we see that effect in sort of virtual worlds and computer-mediated communication environments? So people who, how many gamers have we got in the room? Got a fair few? Yeah? No gamers in the PR company? Come on, we have. So, well, we haven't got many. You guys need a gaming console in this business, let me tell you. So social games, I mean, one of the things the press constantly contact me over the last few years and say, why do we see CEOs and barristers playing Candy Crush? And it's really not necessarily about the game, it's certainly about achieving a sense of moving forward, and it's largely to do with the context in which they're playing the game. They can play it on the move. But they tend to do it as well, particularly females, interestingly, because they share their experience of the achievements they have on social media. So that's why social games, these quick games, mobile games, are very, very successful. Multiplayer games, so you'll have gamers who will be playing with each other all over the world. They'll be playing on various platforms and they'll be connecting together all over the world. Social networking, we all know about. And what's really interesting, we're going to touch on importantly here, is this idea of relating to game characters and avatars in games, relating to artificial intelligence and this type of thing. And again, it's all to do with getting you feeling motivated, feeling good about yourself, feeling like you have a connection with the world. For those people who don't play games, I'll just talk very quickly about what an Npc is. It's a non-player character in a game. So if you're playing in a video game, quite often you will be led by an artificial intelligence or a non-player character within the game. And we know that this is important in terms of relatedness, and there's some, you know, very good research around this in psychology. So it's important because leaderboards, this idea of you socially compare yourself to other people, and comments that people will leave on Facebook, gamers might do that a fair bit. And it gives the gamer the opportunity, when they get feedback from a non-player character in a game, to feel relevant. Recognising and acknowledging these sort of accomplishments, and, oh, you've done really, really well, isn't that great, let's get you on to the next level. That's the kind of interaction people will have. And social identity theory is another theory within psychology that's been very well researched. And we certainly see here the in-group and out-group phenomena taking place. In the gaming community, and one of the conversations I had with Alex when we first started talking about how we might do this talk, the gaming community in particular were one of the first group of people that really started to communicate in virtual environments, in chat rooms, and, you know, they were very fervent about it. And you'll find gamers, they'll either be, you know, into one particular console, or they'll be into another. They're like one genre of a game, or they're like another, and, you know, they really connect in a massive way. The other thing about social identity theory is this idea of groupthink, and this idea that when, you know, you're on Facebook and you're talking about something, and you're sort of, you know, you're discussing something with your peers or friends on Facebook, you know, you'll want to sort of, you know, cohesively come together and collaboratively come to a place where you have some kind of an agreement. These are very well researched models and theories in psychology that we're just starting to understand the impact in cyber psychology environments. Just want to talk very quickly about character attachment in video games. So this is the idea that the viewer's disposition towards the character influences one's enjoyment. So there is real connections here, and this has been researched extensively in video game psychology. And you'll see again that the research is all fairly new, which just really talks about how new the whole idea of and the area of cyber psychology is. So this idea that you imagine yourself being the character in a video game, and we call these kind of parasocial experiences. This would happen years ago when people were reading a book, for example, and you have an attachment, an affinity to a character in a book. In video games, where it's the media is much more in your face and seems much more real, this can be heightened. And actually, people, when they're immersed in these environments, the research tells us, in fact, that they address and they have feelings towards these characters as if they were real people. We know that we suspend our sense of self when we're in some virtual environments, and that's just going to be played out even more so when virtual reality is in everybody's home, that you are really going to start to suspend yourself. You might have an issue where you won't be able to determine the difference between a real world environment, a video game, and a virtual reality environment. But these emotions are very, very real. Some of the work I do with video games companies, we will see 18-year-old males in a lab, and we'll come to an emotional part in a video game, and we will say to them, did you feel anything particularly there? And they'll say, no, didn't feel anything there. But actually, the other readings that we're doing in a lab environment will tell us something very, very different. We psychologists see that people kind of insert themselves into the game via the media character that they may be engaging with, or indeed the avatar that they're playing. And that's how you become present in a video game. And it's a meeting of minds. So this goes back to a great piece of research from Oakley in 1999. There's this narrowing of one's sense of real self in the real world and the character that one is playing in a video game. And again, immersion and engagements are words that you will hear around video games when it comes to psychology. Why are games so compelling? Why do people become so immersed and engaged with them? And it is largely to do with this connection that they have to characters. We'll skip very quickly through this, but this idea of identification, identifying who you are, has been around for a very long time. It's this idea of social construction, that you construct yourself from who you are and who's around you, and characters in books and games. No doubt, we're all teenagers once. We've all read a book where we really wanted, or we've all loved a film, or we've all really enjoyed a group where we really wanted to be that person. So this particular piece of research is very, very useful, and a really great, robust piece of research. And it's this idea about positive attitudes towards the game avatar and the importance of the avatar to your own identity. Very quickly moving on, virtual characters, we found in this particular research that people may love them and feel real close towards them as if they were a real person, and that you have empathetic feelings towards these people. I was very lucky to work on Charlie Brooker documentary about video games a couple of years ago, and the team of producers and directors, they were all big fans of a game called The Last of Us, and I was really, why are you so fervently into this game? What is it about this game that you love? And we're starting to see games that have emotional, empathetic elements within them. If you haven't played it, it's phenomenal. We see a number of games like these coming out now that are impacting and teaching people about empathy, which is really great in virtual environments. So, for example, we have games like Papers, Please, where you actually play, you get to play sort of a border control person, and you let refugees in. Now, that came out 2 years before where we are now. So we're starting to see video games being developed that then are turning out to be happening in a real world environment. So you'll notice that people will go to various functions and they will dress as their character or their avatar in a video game. It means an awful lot to people. It's this idea of narrowing your sense of self, and you can just deal away with some of the self discrepancies that you have. We can become attached to artificial intelligence and non-player characters in games. I'm working on a project, have been for the last 18 months, around isolation and loneliness for older people in particular. We have to be very careful about the graphical and the behavioural fidelity of the characters then. Some of you may have heard of a phenomenon called the Uncanny Valley, where it was first came about by a roboticist called Mori in the 1970s, where you kind of have this eerie feeling where you're looking at some kind of a doll or something that looks, it doesn't look, it looks human, and you know you have an affinity with it, but it's not quite right, and you get this eerie sensation. So it's important we get those kind of elements right in terms of an artificial intelligence communicating with a person who's isolated and lonely on their own. Spoiler alert, film called Her. I don't know who's seen that. So if you haven't, it's a wonderful movie, and the protagonist in it falls in love with his operating system and artificial intelligence. And this is some dialogue. Samantha, who's played by a really beautiful female actress. You don't actually get to see her, but her voice is brilliant. And so Samantha is the artificial intelligence, the operating system, and Theodore is this very lonely gentleman who actually ends up having a relationship, an emotional connection with her that's very, very, very real. And you know, he's kind of trying to pull apart here and understand what it is. You know, why do I feel these feelings towards her? Why does she seem real when she's really not? It's these parasocial experiences that we're starting to see within these virtual environments. And what does it have? Quite often the press will contact me and say, what about, you know, young people immersing in these environments, and what does it mean about empathy? Great piece of research here amongst some Dutch adolescents, and the results found actually that this was over a 2-year period, that it increases adolescents' ability over a period of time to understand cognitive empathy and to share their feelings with their peers. So I think what this is saying is it's not all bad news for these young people who are constantly on their phones and stuff. You know, they are learning things like empathy, and emotional intelligence and empathy are increasingly becoming more important than IQ, in fact. I want to finish up very quickly on this last slide. This is a quote from a great guy called Keith Stewart, who's the games editor at The Guardian. Brilliant book that's just come out. His son is autistic, and his son played Minecraft, and very difficult for those people who understand these kind of issues with people. It's very difficult to communicate sometimes with these kind of issues and people who have these you know, awful things. And he's managed to do this through a game called Minecraft. And you know, I would empower you if you do have children. There's some great work as well around intergenerational gaming, where you have young males and females teaching their grandparents and their parents how to play games, and it's how you get to connect with people. If you haven't read his book, it's absolutely brilliant. That's it. Thank you so much. I'm very grateful to you all.